Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
And welcome back. If you've ever thought about writing a book, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, I believe a lot of us have toyed with the idea in the back of our mind based on our experiences, our work, our history, lineage, all of that. It can be done. It can be done if you have the desire. It can be done with some help from somebody that's done it for a lot of other people many times over. And that's this gentleman. We're going to talk about the creative process today in writing a book and also get to marketing that book, getting the word out there. His company is NFB Publishing, and he's back with us. Mark Pogodzinski is on the program. Hey, Mark, how you doing?
Good. How are you today?
I'm well. I'm well. Yeah. Great having you back here so we could pick up where we left off. We skimmed the water on the creative process. What do you want people to know when it comes to starting that book and along the way?
The first thing we have to know is that it's not as easy as it may seem from time to time. Writer's block is a real thing. Coming up with a concept, especially if you're working on a novel. Novels can be a slog from time to time. It'd be nice to say that if you have the idea, you can just sit down and write away and come up with it. But it does take some time, and it does take a little patience, especially with yourself. There are frustrating parts of writing when scenes don't come together, where you thought you had an idea, a viable idea, and it's not working out as well as you had hoped. And there are techniques to help people get around those issues, those roadblocks. But the biggest thing is to have patience with yourself, to understand that it's not going to be an easy thing. Writing a book is hard. To put a fine point on it, it's a difficult thing to do. Nonfiction along the same lines. I know a one author who was looking into writing a book about the Pony Express was the topic. They were interested in it. They had done a couple lectures on it. They thought about writing a book, and they started doing the research, and thousands of websites, books upon books, and it became, in a sense, overwhelming, and they gave up, which is something that can happen. And they came and they asked for some advice, and for that, when you have such a large topic, is my always advice is to try to compartmentalize it, break it down to its components, especially with nonfiction. What do you want your audience to understand about the topic? And once we talked through it a little bit, they were able to come up with a better outline of what they wanted. And it became a series of employees of the Pony Express with a basic outline rather than the entire story of that organization. So again, the biggest thing I can give in terms of advice is be patient with yourself and understand there are going to be roadblocks. It could be a multi-year, and again, that's kind of overwhelming too, a multi-year project.
You addressed one of the questions I was going to bring up, in that somebody getting frustrated and throwing in the towel, just realizing, oh, for whatever reason, I can't do this, or this is just too much for me, or I'm never going to be able to do that. How do you talk somebody off the ledge?
I think with any artistic endeavor, especially with people who are working a job, you have a 9-to-5 job, you're paying your bills, maybe you have a family, you have all these other responsibilities. Go back to it, don't be brutal on yourself. Understand that there is going to be time, there might be months where you can't get back to your project because of whatever reason, and that's okay. There is no right or wrong way to get to a finished product. And I think that works for most artists who are not professional in their field. And be easy on yourself. Okay? It'd be nice to give yourself a schedule where you've carved out time to work on your project. That's not always viable. Again, most of us are working 9-to-5 jobs, children, all sorts of thousands of different responsibilities. And I've known artists and writers who hammer away at their own psyche with like, this is just a flight of fancy. Okay. I'm not a professional writer. Why am I wasting time on this? I have so many other responsibilities. I'm missing out on this because I'm choosing to pursue this. And those thoughts are common. And you just have to work through them, talk to somebody, talk to someone who works in the field, or talk to a friend, and understand that, again, there's no right way to get to that final product. So again, the best advice I can give is be easy on yourself, especially if you're just trying out this artistic endeavor.
Hmm. And it's new territory. You may know the subject matter. Let's say you're a professional and you're writing a nonfiction fiction book, or you might have that passion like the Pony Express or piece of history, and it just motivates you. You might not know the book writing part, but that's okay, because you're walking that journey along with somebody, and helping them with the creative process. Getting back into that process, what are some of the other things that get accomplished along the way, or how are they done?
For fiction writing, a lot of people are doing that novel. I encourage you to have a secondary project along the way, whether it's a short story or a poem or something else. Hammering away at fiction day after day can take its toll, and it can impact the writing in a negative way. So I always advise you have your novel, you have this thing that you're working on. What else? What other side project are you working on? And it could be as simple as they say, a poem. And poems are not simple, but a poetry collection of 15 poems that you're trying to get to. And that, I think, allows your mind to breathe a little bit rather than focusing on this novel. I'm on chapter 27. I need to get to chapter 50. These characters, they're not meshing their way. I hope. Give yourself something else to think about. And it doesn't even have to be writing if you're a writer. It could be simple as training for something, a mini marathon, or something else to occupy your brain. And that actually can, when you have a 9 to 5 job, can come in handy because it makes you think about other things. It makes you think about things differently, and that can actually help your writing.
Hmm.
I know a writer who claims that his greatest ideas come when he's on the toilet. He's having a bad day writing. He goes to the bathroom. He's just thinking and sitting there, and things are happening. And he's like, "I got it. I got it. I know where I can go differently with this, and I can revamp it, and it's better." And his claim is the bathroom is his place to think. And he's got kids and everything, but it's a quiet minute or two, depending on what's happening, and he's able to think just by himself, and that works for him. Other writers I know someone who's taken up marathoning. They haven't actually completed a marathon, but they train. So that helps them schedule their day. Kids, work, marathon training, writing. And they're able to compartmentalize it, and that's what they need. So there's all sorts of different ways to get yourself to that point where you're able to write. And you just have to find out what works best for you.
Hmm. I good for him. Works in the bathroom. I back in the day, I would mow the lawn. I had old riding mower, and that's where I would get ideas. And I've been finding now I get maybe not ideas, but clarity taking a shower. Where I'm in and out of the shower in like 90 seconds. But when I have the time and I allow just the hot water and I just sit there and I'm thinking, it's like, I don't want to leave. I'm getting a download. This is good stuff going on here. Yeah, you got to find whatever works for you, I guess.
And there's scientific proof that shows that if you can have a various interests, it can help you focus on something that you really want to focus on, because your brain is pulled in all these different directions. And then it helps you to focus on when you're ready to get down and start writing. And again, I carry pads with me wherever I go. I'm sure probably as an artist, you might carry a pad, something to sketch,
Sure.
yeah, wherever you may be, and write down an idea, write down a line. Um, I have children, and when they go to practice, I'm watching them practice soccer or swimming or whatever it may be, something pops in my head, and that's a line, and I'll circle it, and I'll try to come back to it later. As an artist or as a writer, you're never not a writer. Okay, you might be
Hmm.
a teacher or a podcast host or whatever, but you're still that artist working. And even though you're doing like an interview, or if you're doing whatever your job may be, in the back of your mind, that creative process is still there and it's still percolating. And you should just have like a little outlet, sketchbook, a pad to write down just in case an idea pops up.
100%. And great point in writing it down. We can type it into our phones, but the I think we mentioned once before the research extensively done on the connection between the mind and the hand when you physically write it. It's just different. It makes an imprint on you as opposed to typing it. So go old school, get a 99-cent notebook and just carry it around, write it down, and especially by your bedside, first thing in the morning. That's your best opportunity. Your brain is a fresh slate. Or if you set the intention before you went to bed, so many times I wake up in the middle of the night. Yeah, I'll write that down in the morning. Morning comes, I forgot.
Yes.
I try it, and I try to remember, but it's like I can't do it. So that's not coming back to me. So yeah, definitely writing it down is very impactful. Anything, imagine if we just keep writing things down, not just book ideas, but just life in general. How many clarity thoughts we might have along the way instead of just letting it just vaporize.
I think it's helpful, and it's a clearinghouse sometimes to get those thoughts out there down on paper, and then they have a life of their own and they're not constantly coming up. When I do teach creative writing, I always buy the entire class those little Mead notebooks that flip up, because I always
Mm.
like the idea of the flip up notebook is like a detective or something from my youth
It's the
that I always,
first, that's the first picture I got. That is
yes.
so funny. Like we think the same like that in visual, where the detective was taking all right, man.
I'm pretty sure it was Columbo. I'm almost positive that's where the idea comes from,
Yeah.
because he always had notepads and he would always look for his pencil.
It was always disheveled. He had the trench coat on. I think he was smoking a cigar. He's like, all
Yeah.
right, give me more over here. Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, and I like that idea. Just having it with you, you flip it up and write it down, and then you keep that notebook. And like, especially with the younger generations, they stare at me when I give out these notebooks. So like, what do you want me to do with this? I was like, well, carry it with you. You can keep it right by your phone if you wish. And if you have an idea, instead of like texting it or posting it, you write it down for yourself. And that way you could edit it. And if you want to do something with like a post later, that's fine. But the idea of writing it down on a pad, having a pen, and just having that with you. And
Mm,
I like that idea a lot. A lot of the younger writers prefer their phone, but I think you're the same way. I don't type fast enough on my phone to begin with to have the idea.
same.
I have my own shorthand, which I like. I can understand what it means, but I'm quicker with a pen than I am with a phone, and it could be just a generational thing. But
I totally agree. And call me old, but I'm also geeky, very much so. But I find myself like type again. Texting all day. After a while, it gets draining. I'm like, oh, I gotta turn. Mm. And especially when it's something, those ideas now become secondary or tertiary in terms of the priority of writing them down because you're so busy typing other things that it's like, oh yeah, that idea, I'll get to that. Then you forget it. And you got to come into a rhythm of just breaking out. By the way, in the spiral on the notebook, you can shove the pen in there. You don't always have to be looking for it.
and I have found that once the I call them kids, once the kids get into it, they like the notebook. They like to take it out and they like to read through their thoughts,
Mm,
flipping the papers back. And I mean, I don't know many people go through their old posts. They're like, "Ooh, I had something really good a month ago." I don't know many people who do that, but you go through those pages and you see what you wrote down. And again, for me, it's like 40 years of random thoughts. And it's interesting to see what I thought, 20 years ago about a topic than I do now. And again, if for the writer, that could be the start of something, whether it's a
mm.
memoir, novel, or a research idea. I was interested in the Crusades years ago, and like, oh, I know there's many books out there, but maybe I can do something different with my research, or maybe I could do a fictional account of like that monumental historical event. And those thoughts live in the notebooks. And I think it's easier for us to go through them than on scrolling through our phone looking for an old post.
It is also interesting when you go back and look at your thoughts, whether they're notes or you keep a journal. I have a gratitude journal. The other day, I went back to it from like 2 years ago and look at your progression. And also, if it's creative ideas, looking back, and then you say to yourself, I thought of that. Damn, that was good.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's
And
great.
why do I think I don't really think like that all the time anymore? So maybe it could be just, a little bit of fuel to prime your engine up here and get you back into that mode. I've done that many times. I'm like, you came up with that, bro? That's good. How'd you do that?
And it doesn't feel good to be impressed with yourself. Like,
Yes, it doesn't
oh,
happen often.
I had a moment
I
five
had a
years
mode.
ago.
Right. And then you wonder, where did the inspiration come for that idea? Because that one was actually pretty clear, detailed. Wow. But seeing your progression, even if it's just book ideas or parts of a book, whatever, uh, it's really interesting when you look back over the years. So I such an important suggestion in keeping notes, journal, however you want to phrase it. Wow.
I think that helps you when you're working on a bigger project too. You're dominated by this idea that I got this book, I got to finish this book, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. But then you have this side thing that you go in this little journal. You're like, I wrote 2 lines of a poem. You come back to it, maybe try to finish it, and that might give you an idea for that bigger project, or something to include, or whatever it may be. Those connections are vital,
Mm.
and I think are more important than we give them credit for.
What if you're a professional? You want to write a book that's fiction. I'm sorry, nonfiction. And your goal here is to get some notoriety, but also more credibility for your field. You're busy, you're not a writer, you really want to get it done. What would be the process there? Are we talking about a ghostwriter? Obviously, you want your thoughts to be in the book, but could you take voice notes? Like, how would that work? And I don't know how they did it, but I know some professionals that have put out books and it's been really, helpful in their career just to say I'm published and the book is basically selling their services anyway. But how would that work?
And multiple academics that we've worked with are brilliant people in their field. And then when they sit down to write a book, they stare blankly at the computer screen, or they have the pen in their hand and they haven't done anything for a half an hour. Again, it is not easy to write a book. You can be a professional academic for years and have lectured on your topic, but to sit down and start putting those ideas on paper in a coherent manner is not an easy thing. So I'm a big fan of ghostwriters, especially for like academic books. People who are writers by their job, who don't know the topic or the subject matter, but can help you or help that person write a coherent book and make it sound interesting, and it flows correctly, and it's not stale, or it's not a series of instructions. We've had one particular guy who wanted to write a book about physics, brilliant man. Taught particle physics, and really out of the mind blowing stuff. But he couldn't write. He could
Hmm.
talk about it.
Right. Yeah.
And he would go off on these tangents, and you had no idea because he would start talking about formulas and like, all right, so you want a novice, me or you, who have no idea about particle physics, to read this book and enjoy it. I have no idea what you're talking about at this point, and we've been speaking for 15 minutes. So he needed a ghostwriter. He needed a ghostwriter who had no idea what he was talking about. And when they spoke and when they worked together, he taught her particle physics. And that's
Ah.
what the book became. It was basically her interpretation of this incredibly deep subject filtered through her experience. And then the book came out and it was very popular and a lot of people enjoyed it. And one of the parts of the feedback we got was like, this was an approachable book about a complex matter. So that, again, that relationship with that ghostwriter, two people from incredibly different worlds who were
Wow.
able to come together and make that book happen. So I'm a big fan of ghostwriters. I like ghostwriters who have no idea about the topic because it forces the person, the author, to explain it. And when you explain it, the book comes together.
And it's a fresh look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're just about out of time, but you bring up a point I have to put a microscope on. In helping all these authors as you got so many titles on your website. Do you feel like you've learned a lot through them about history, emotion, challenges, all of that?
You can't help but learn and learn a little bit about yourself and how you would deal with it. We talked about a couple times before those traumatic memoirs. You learn a lot about humanity, about compassion, about emotion.
Yeah.
And I think that's been the biggest thing for me, is to look how I would deal with these things and how I've dealt with my own traumas and tragedies, and understand like it's different for all people, but there's that connection, that emotional connection. And then the other books, learning a lot about history and about different people's method of going about writing fiction. So I've learned a lot, but I think the most I've learned is about myself and how I deal with my own trauma through how other people have dealt with it. And I think that's an incredibly important lesson for me.
I I understand in many ways because in hosting podcasts of all different topics, but mostly a lot of metaphysical, self-help, energy healing, um, all of that arena, I've learned so much more about myself and like you, able to share it with others through whatever means that may be. Um, and you probably never realized that that would happen when you started a publishing company.
No, I
Right?
thought it'd be mostly murder mysteries
Right.
like that, but it's been great, honestly.
Yeah. And I'm going to say this, and I wonder if in your life you would agree, but for me doing this, it came along at just the right time it needed to in my life. And I wonder if it did for you to reflect on your challenges and situations.
I think that's a longer conversation, perhaps next time. But you're right. I think like when I started, I was coming from a place of sorrow,
Mhm.
and I needed to do something to help myself and help others at the same time.
Yep.
And again, that could be like a longer conversation, but I think what inspires us to create is as important as what we create, because that's the birthplace of it.
Yep. Knowing a little bit of your story, and we can pick up from there another time. All I'm going to say is, I got you. I understand. In my way, I can't, fully understand in your way, but just sharing with others, helping others, refocuses you from what you have going on. Um, Tell us how we find you. Somebody's thinking about writing a book. This resonates. How do we do that?
So you go to the website, nfbpublishing.com. There's a submissions page. There's a very small form to fill out. Nothing too intense. It just gives an idea of what your project is about, what state it's in, and how we can help you.
I love the fact that your model, your vibe is like a small, town publisher. But here's the thing. It can start there, and somebody's got a good book, and with a little bit of promotion, that book here could become this book out here. You never know what's going to happen.
You know
And
what's going to hit. That's the thing too.
exactly. And I love your honesty and transparency in what you do and how you work with people. And appreciate you being here, Mark.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, I mean, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.